Namaste. In chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, verse 58, Krishna says, when the yogi, like a tortoise withdrawing its head and limbs into its shell, is able to withdraw his energy from the objects of sense perception, he becomes established in wisdom. How do you withdraw that energy from the senses? Well, as long as the breath is going, the mind will be outward. And how do you withdraw the breath from the energy from the breath? Well, the purpose of the breath is to keep the body oxygenated. And as long as there is restlessness in the body, you'll be breaking down the tissues, they'll be producing carbon. That carbon will cause you to have to breathe. And for example, you cannot run a race and then sit calmly. You find yourself panting because you have to replenish your supply of oxygen. Now, when there is no more need for oxygen because the mind becomes completely calm, the body becomes completely calm, then it is possible to go into breathlessness. Breathlessness comes automatically then, but there is more to it than that. When you inwardly concentrate and absolutely are focused on one thing, you know, when you're thinking very deeply about something, you find somebody's perhaps giving you a very carefully reasoned argument. You want to listen. You notice you're not breathing then. Then when you get the point, you inhale again. Breath is something that automatically ceases when you go deep in thinking, concentration, anything. So what you do with this technique, which I have taught you of Hong So and watching the breath, you find that your breathing stops, and then this is what happens in sleep, isn't it? In sleep, as you go into deep sleep, your energy begins to withdraw from the senses. This happens also in death. When my guru once brought somebody back from death, he started to breathe, and he said, "Oh, I've come from such a long way away." And another interesting thing is, there was a couple, a boy and his sister, who were students of Yogananda's, and the sister died. And the boy remembered that Yogananda said the last of the senses to go is the hearing. So he talked in his sister's right ear, and he kept calling her, "Sister, sister, remember, you're my own sister. I want you back. I don't want you leaving this world." And after a while, she inhaled, and she said, "I was so far away, and your voice called me back, and I came back." But this is the truth, that when you go deep into inner silence, and with the senses, the energy from the senses begins to withdraw, so that if you're asleep, somebody may have to shake you to wake you up. He can call you, and you don't even hear him. So this is a partial withdrawal of what happens in ecstasy, what happens in deep meditation, that the energy withdraws, and it's a very necessary thing, because otherwise the world is always there. And the sense telephones, my guru used to say, because when the telephone rings, you hear it and you have to go and answer it. And so you need to come to that point where the world doesn't anymore impinge on your concentration, on your awareness. This is the state that Krishna is talking about here, that we must withdraw the energy from the senses to that point where we are able to concentrate with a firm mind without any distraction from the sense telephones. This is what Krishna is talking about, like a tortoise withdrawing into its shell. In deep meditation, you withdraw into your shell, and you're no longer aware of the world around you, and then you become aware of another world inside, a world of bliss and light and beauty. And this is the important thing, the important reason for that technique of Hong So, the important thing of going breathless. And the thing is that this is a teaching that I cannot verify, but it is a yogic teaching, that you are allotted a certain number of breaths for each lifetime. And when those breaths are finished, you die. Whether that is a myth or true, I'm not able to say. But when they say breathlessness is deathlessness, what they are meaning is that in breathlessness you're not taking a breath. And so you have a long store, perhaps if you've been breathless for a long time, a long store where you can't die because you haven't taken your allotted number of breaths. Now you can take that as myth, you can take it as reality, but it's a very interesting possibility. So when your energy is withdrawn from the object of sense perception, then you go into the superconscious state and you are established in wisdom. I told you a story, a very interesting story some days ago. I said that when the ego is ready to fall into delusion because of some power of past samskaras pulling him down, the soul very often will give you superconscious experiences to try to win you back to that search for God away from this pull of Maya. And there was a brother disciple of mine who had many very amazing experiences, but he fell anyway, and my guru told him that it would take him another 200 incarnations to get back to where he was right now. A terrible thing. But it was his choice, and you can't do anything about it. My guru tried so hard, and his own superconscious tried so hard. But I remember going into his bedroom one time and seeing him stretched out. His hands were on his chest. He wasn't breathing. He was in superconsciousness. Well, this is the sort of thing that his good karma was trying to win him back. But unfortunately, that bad karma was too heavy, and he just fell for this lifetime, and unfortunately many others. 59. The man who merely abstains from sense enjoyments may forget them for a time, but the lure, the taste for them will linger. That person, however, who beholds the Supreme Spirit loses the taste for anything but the infinite. My guru, as I've said before, said that the best way to overcome, he used the example, a taste for bad cheese, stale cheese, is to taste good cheese. The comparison is so obvious that naturally you want the good cheese. So if you were bothered by delusion, and if things are pulling you to the world, try to find those things which will give you greater joy. The joys of this world pale into insignificance once you begin to feel God's presence in yourself. So you don't need to worry, because yes, of course it's difficult to get out of Maya. Of course it's difficult to pull yourself out of that swamp of delusion and follow the path to God. But if you, instead of worrying about what you've got to fight, concentrate on the good side. Don't feel that you've got to overcome this and overcome that and so on. Concentrate on that good cheese. Concentrate on that bliss of your own being. And when you have that, the comparison is so obvious, you don't need the other. So you don't need to worry too much about delusion. Actually, in thinking about delusion, what you're doing is giving it power. This is why Yogananda said, don't ever call yourself a sinner. Never accept that that is your definition of who you are. You are the child of God, and the more you emphasize that positive side, the more you affirm your purity before God. Every tendency to steal, to murder, to hurt, to be lustful, to everything that people get sucked into in their long journey of incarnations, instead of worrying about it, instead of thinking, well, you can't get rid of darkness by beating at it with a stick, as my guru said. What you need to do is turn on the light. So don't worry about your defects. Don't worry about your your sins. Just love God more deeply. Be engrossed in Him. Krishna is talking about this positive side. When you have done that, when your energy goes toward Him, then you will, it's not just you have to get rid of sense pleasures. You know, many people, they think, well, I don't want them now, but for a while you may not want them. It takes 8 to 12 years to get rid of a really bad habit, a strong bad habit. You must get rid of them very forcefully, but at the same time, you must substitute for them. It was like a man who was an alcoholic, and he couldn't help his alcoholism. He was stuck in it. But he became a devotee and a disciple of Yogananda. And he he decided to take initiation. Well, his friends laughed at him. They said, here you are, drunk. You can't help taking alcohol, and here you talk of taking initiation into this sacred science. And the man said, look, I can't help being a drunkard, but at least I can help what I'm going to do in a positive way. So he used to sit there with a glass of whiskey in one hand and his Kriya mala in the other, and he did his Kriya and then take a sip, and then another few Kriyas and then take a sip. And of course it seemed ridiculous, and in some points of view you might say it was ridiculous. But after a certain time he began to feel so much satisfaction in Kriya Yoga practice that he said, I don't need this whiskey, and he left it and never went back to it. So what you need is a good thing to compare with. And as you, instead of worrying about the things you've done wrong and the faults that you have and your weaknesses and so on, everybody's got something until he finds freedom. But emphasize the positive side. Emphasize that you are a child of God. Emphasize that no matter how difficult it may be, this is what you're going to do. Bit by bit, that side will become blissful enough for you to say, I don't want that stale cheese. It means nothing to me anymore. And so, emphasize the positive. That person who beholds the Supreme Spirit loses the taste for anything but the infinite. O son of Kunti in verse 60, O son of Kunti, which is the power of dispassion, Arjuna, even the wise man, devoted to self-control, may sometimes be swept away by the turbulences. And yes, this does happen. And many people, though they are on the path, suddenly find themselves caught. Master talked of these violent delusions that can seize people. They're there in your subconscious. But don't worry about those delusions. Don't worry if suddenly you have this hankering for something worldly or whatever. Just say, let it be. I will keep plodding in my direction. In the end, I will get there. Remember the story and the folk story of the hare and the tortoise? The hare was a very quick runner. The tortoise was very slow. And so they challenged each other to a race. And of course, the hare thought, this is ridiculous. The tortoise challenged the hare. And when the hare reached the finishing point, he thought, well, let me rest a little bit. I don't need to go fast. He's creeping up behind me. It doesn't matter. Well, while he was resting, the tortoise passed the finishing line. And so it is that we may, and this does often happen, as you begin to find some level of peace and confidence in yourself, spiritual depth in yourself, you may become lazy. Don't ever rest until you have actually attained God. Too many people on the path begin to feel, after all, if you're sattvic, you're happy. And if you're happy, well, this is why people in the astral world, they may get to mix with devatas and they may have a wonderful life, but they don't advance spiritually for the simple reason that everything is so wonderful. They feel so much happiness and so much peace and so much beauty, and everything is just so much according to what they want, that from those higher spheres until you go to the very high spheres, it's not possible to advance spiritually because you don't have the incentive to. This world gives you that incentive. This world shows you much suffering and much pain and much hard times. And so we have this incentive. Actually, what helped to drive me toward God in the beginning was the realization of all the evil in this world, and the further realization that I myself could be evil if I fell into the particular delusions these people do. And I felt that it was absolutely desperate that I find God. Only until I had God would I know freedom. And so this drove me toward God, even as desire for God pulled me. We need those things. We need those incentives. But in this state of delusion, we find ourselves constantly pulled back, even at the door, as you're ready to enter into the infinite. That thought of, well, I've got it now, I don't have to worry. No, don't be satisfied until you've crossed over. My guru said to me that even nirvikalpa samadhi, you can fall from that. And he told me of several cases where people have fallen from it. You have to get rid of the ego completely. You have to go through that door, past that finishing line. You have to attain the thought, the realization that in nirvikalpa samadhi, that the ego really ceases to exist, instead of coming back from it to ego and then falling into the old line all over again. These things are necessary. When you take up the plow, don't turn back, Jesus said. And his teachings are very much of Sanatana Dharma. In fact, there is a true teaching, a true tradition that Jesus went to India, and there he learned the teachings of yoga and so on. This is something my guru said was true. It's not just a myth. He said that the three wise men who came to Jesus at the time of birth were our own line of gurus, Babaji, Larry Mahasaya, and Sri Yukteswar. And he said that when he grew up, when he reached the age of 12, you notice there are 18 years missing from the life of Christ. In those 18 years, the last you hear of him is meeting with the Pundits or Pharisees in the temple. Then he went to India and he learned these teachings. And what he brought back was the teachings of India. And you will find that the New Testament is full of the same truths taught by Krishna and taught by all the great rishis of old. And so, keep your faith in God, but keep trying until you reach the goal. Joy to you.